I've introduced you. Do you want to start your presentation?
Thanks. Yes, I'm just going to set myself up to share the presentation now, and
Great.
Let's hope all this will look okay. Let me know, please. There we go. Takes a couple of minutes, I think, or literally a minute. Is that okay? Yeah, can you see it? Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm having a few notifications here. Sorry about that. So, right, the first thing is, thank you very much for inviting me today. I am the research funding manager, part of a team of 5, working in the central office, of course. I joined Edinburgh Napier University back in October, so I still consider myself relatively new, to be honest. Although I have been working in research funding for around about 20 years now at the University of Edinburgh. So the talk today is about the research funding landscape, and I had some initial ideas really as to why would you consider applying for a grant? Well, first of all, oops, sorry, my keyboard is playing up here. So first of all, why? Well, it's a good way of building your track record, of course, for your CV, and it increases your chances for promotion and professional self-esteem. As you are progressing through your career, you will have plenty of opportunities to apply for a wide range of funding opportunities. But as you know, the funding landscape is actually quite competitive. So my first tip would be to check the professional organizations that you may be a member of and find out if they have any small pots of funding. They often do. And this would be maybe for poster presentations, attending conferences, that kind of thing. The other thing, of course, is that by applying for grants, you can actually build your academic networking opportunities. It's really important in a way to have connections, because other experienced academics might be able to offer you support either as a peer reviewer or a mentor, or coaching you in your career. Then, of course, you don't have to be a PI on a grant. You can be invited to become a co-I on a grant and perhaps look after a specific work package of a larger grant. So that's another good way of becoming involved and gaining experience. The other thing I would suggest is definitely to keep your website up to date, and also make sure that you update your work profile, because this information, of course, is public, and especially with increased AI opportunities, your information will become visible to other potential collaborators. The other thing I would suggest is to make sure that you check the early career definition, because they can vary between funders. And then finally, most funders have a scheme for you available, and this is what I'm going to talk about next. So what we have really, the way I've kind of presented it, is 3 different areas. It's the councils and UK government, charities and trusts, and research fellowships. Now, you've noticed here that I've put EU funding in a bracket, but I will have a reference to that later on, because we do have an exciting opportunity at Napier to invite you along to an EU networking event. But first of all, let's have a look at the councils. The research councils are disciplinary councils, and they bring together a range of areas of research. The aim, scale and balance of the projects funded reflect the national research priorities agreed in consultation with the government and other stakeholders. There's quite a few, of course, that are listed here, but AHRC and ESRC are probably the most appropriate for looking at particular funding opportunities. We also have Innovate UK, which is the National Innovation Agency, and they support business-led innovation in all sectors, technology and UK regions. Then we have the other UK government departments. DEFRA are responsible for improving and protecting the environment, and they have funding programs on the environment, food and rural affairs. The National Institute for Health and Care Research, they have a national programme to investigate a broad range of healthcare matters, including the provision of funding to support the training and education of future health researchers. And of course, there are links with the business school here as well. I have added some other information on the slides, and once these are distributed, you will be able to have a look at that, because it's actually quite a lot of information to discuss today. The next section is trusts, charities and foundations, and I've listed a few on the left there that you are no doubt familiar with, and of course we have our other guest speaker from Nuffield Foundation that will present a talk on that as well. Just to highlight two, perhaps, the RAC in Scotland is the National Academy and is identifying 3 broad challenges that are facing Scotland and the world. The challenges are addressed through an interdisciplinary approach, excuse me, encompassing the natural sciences, the economic and social sciences, humanities, creative arts, and the world of practice. Their small research grant scheme has just been announced, and I would definitely recommend to have a look at that. The British Academy is the UK national body for the humanities and social sciences. They kind of look at the study of peoples, cultures and societies, past, present and future. The British Academy provides a variety of grants and fellowships to support your career. And again, we can have a look at that later on. Now, the main thing to consider is that the trust, charities and foundations actually complement the objectives of the Research Council and government departments. The trusts and charities have very specific aims, as I explained earlier on, but they make sure that you do understand these and that you're able to demonstrate them in your application. You must be mindful of their funding eligibility rules. Trusts and charities do not necessarily cover the full economic costing. And again, if you'd like to have more information on that, I can discuss that later on. But certainly, if you are going to apply for that, do discuss it with your school first of all. Then assessment panels are comprised of senior academics with considerable experience of evaluating research proposals. Their membership, however, does not necessarily include anyone with detailed or highly specialist knowledge of your specific subject area. So again, that is something to consider when you're writing your application. Next is the research fellowships. Again, I've listed a few there that you can have a look at. Research fellowships is a very specific type of application. It's usually a trip or a residency, and it has of course a research focus. Fellowship funding is a personal award, is to conduct independent research that is aligned with your career stage. It can be a limited financial contribution. Usually it's a stipend, travel costs and accommodation, or perhaps a combination of that. It may require a top-up contribution from the school. Each fellowship fund is to be considered on a case-by-case basis. There are specific eligibility requirements. Again, do check the funder guidance. Discuss with your line manager before going ahead about any formal plans, because it may be that they have to cover for your teaching commitments, for instance. On occasion, you may have to contact the host beforehand just to make sure that it fits in with their objectives, your potential residency. And of course, if you are a non-UK citizen, you do have to check visa and residency implications, for instance, if you're going to be abroad for more than 6 months, for instance. Usually they demand quite a lot of supporting documents, letters of support, referee details, so make sure that you are aware of all this. The next opportunity I'd like to discuss here is looking at Research Professional. This is an online database that details a lot of research funding opportunities and is a source of research intelligence. Most universities, and I'm aware that some participants at this session are not necessarily based at Edinburgh Napier, but most universities have got a membership. Napier has quite a few training videos to kind of get yourself familiar with the platform. I've just produced put a screenshot here just to give you some idea of what it looks like, but I would certainly recommend that you go and have a look at it. External funding opportunities. Well, we also advertise these on our Teams channel. There is also a way of signing up to UKRI for sometimes there are specific collaborations with countries, but also specialist areas. And then we also send targeted emails from our office. So what I would like to suggest for preparations is map your project against funder priorities and eligibility and their criteria. Check how your proposal will be assessed and who is on the selection panel. It's amazing how much information is available online. Check for successful applications on the funders portal. You all have academics in Napier all have access to a work tribe, and you can search that resource as well. There is, of course, other websites at other universities that will have successful applications. Check your network contacts, work out who you can collaborate with, companies, industries, communities and government. Develop a realistic timeline. Consider what you need for peer reviewers. So those are the ones that will help you and shape your application. And then, of course, talk to your line manager. If you're thinking of applying, then please do create a work tribe record and add the funder scheme, the URL of the scheme and the funder deadline. This is quite important because it allows us in the office to do any reports. And then we have online resources. And if you do get stuck, please get in touch with me. That's fine. Just here, I'm ending with a couple of announcements of funding opportunities that are coming up now. We have the British Academy, the Carnegie Trust is going to make an announcement. The Royal Society has made an announcement. And then there are opportunities with the Arts and Humanities Research Council, both for a smaller award up to 100,000 and then a larger one. I mentioned earlier on that there is a networking event. You should have received information on that in your mailbox, but please do sign up. And if you have any questions, just get in touch. Thank you. Any questions?
Great. Okay, thank you so much, Gina. That was really helpful. Great. Okay, so joining us from Nuffield. He is Nuffield Foundation's Director of Justice, and he's responsible for overseeing and developing the portfolio of research projects in justice, working closely with grant holders, the research community, and people working in the justice system. Rob has a background in law and criminology, but previously he spent most of his career as a social researcher at the Home Office, working on a wide range of policy topics in crime and criminal justice. So very well qualified to talk on this topic. Christine, are you recording again?
We are recording again now.
Perfect, that's great. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks very much, Rob. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Katrina. I'll just share my screen. Hold on a sec. Can you all see that?
Yep, looks good. Thanks.
Okay. So morning, everyone. Thanks very much for that introduction, Katrina, and thanks very much to you and Kirsten for inviting me today. It's very good to be here. I'm going to give you an overview of the Nuffield Foundation, what we do, and our grant funding opportunities and processes, and including what we look for in applications. I'm also going to say a bit about our priorities in our justice area, because you'll probably know that, I mean, we're not the only funder in this space, but the Nuffield Foundation is one of the relatively few sort of funders in the areas of social policy with an enduring interest in law and justice. So we always fund research in this area. I should start with a couple of quick apologies. Firstly, I'm here in the office. I'm in one of those little booths, and we've got this kind of eco lighting that means you can barely see me. So I'm aware that I'm mainly just a silhouette, but I am here. Sorry that you can't see me better. And second, I've committed the cardinal sin of probably having too many slides in my presentation. So I will rattle through them fairly quickly. Everything I'm going to say, or nearly everything, all the information I'm going to impart today is actually on our website. There's a funding page on the Nuffield Foundation website and something called the Guide for Applicants. All the details are there. Or anything that I say you want to follow up on afterwards, you're always very welcome to come back to me. So with those kind of caveats, let me get going. So I don't know how familiar you are with the Nuffield Foundation. We're an independent charitable trust with a mission to advance social well-being. So we've got a very kind of broad remit, if you like, within a just and inclusive society. And we have a particular focus, I think, on trying to fund research that has the capacity to make a practical difference to people's lives by influencing policy and practice. So we do, and I'll say a bit more about this later, we'll talk about impact. So we do fund more sort of pure academic research, if you like, but we're always focused wherever we can on the opportunity to influence policy and practice and kind of public debate. And of course, we're UK wide. We fund research in and on all 4 UK nations. Sorry, my screen has frozen. There we go. So just to say a little bit more about our kind of key principles. I mean, this is an important part, I think, what we can offer. So we are a financially and politically independent organisation. We have our own endowment, and basically that's what we spend. So we can offer anyone that we fund sort of no political strings or agendas. We can also offer active support for people in their work and helping to connect them, and I'll say a bit more about that in a minute. We have a very strong focus on rigour and quality of the research we fund, and that's really critical to us. We want to fund work that is rigorous and credible, and that's a key part of it, we think, of being impactful and trustworthy. Connecting perspectives is really the point I've just made about connecting research, policy, practice, and those who are using or receiving services, and indeed sort of public debate, which might be a key interest in some of these topic areas. So how do we connect those different elements that are involved in research? And I think all those things kind of come together really around this critical overarching concern that I guess we all have about building trust and evidence. So independence, credibility, rigor, relevance, and connecting with the reality of people's lives, we think are all parts of that, of our mission. So to give you a bit of detail, and as I said, all of this is on our website. So I'm going to talk mainly today about our main grants fund, which is our Research Development and Analysis Fund. And I'll say a bit more specifically about what we do in relation to ECRs later, but we fund early career researchers under our main fund, so we don't have any specific fund for early career applicants. We have 2 funding rounds a year. One is mid-October, one's in kind of mid-April. We've shifted those. They used to be mid-September and mid-March, but we've shifted them forward a bit. And essentially, we always offer grants up to, well, from sort of £5,000 up to £750,000. And in April, once a year, we have our big strategic fund where we have grants available up to 3 million. But I'm not going to talk about that today. So I'm going to talk really mainly about our main process. And it's an online application system. It's relatively simple, I think. We have a 2-stage process. So you put in a relatively short outline application. We assess that in-house across our team. We've got lots of people with expertise in different subject areas. And then we shortlist a proportion of the outlines. They proceed to full application stage. Full applications do go to external peer review, with the opportunity goes back to the applicant to actually respond to the review of comments. And the final decisions are made by our grants committee, which is a mix of Nuffield Foundation staff and trustees. So just to expand on that a bit, typically the size of the projects we fund, and this picks up a bit on what Jim's saying, are between 150 and 300k, but there's no kind of set amount. So we fund from very small grants up to $750,000, but that's typically around the size we fund. But so we fund plenty of projects that are certainly under 50k, and increasingly some that are nearer sort of $500,000, but typically that's sort of the average or medium point. And projects sort of duration, again, we don't have any specified point on this, but they tend to last between sort of 12 months and till 3 years typically. It's very competitive. I guess you know that. We're no different from any other funder in that regard. We get around 200 outline applications per round. Around 15% of those are shortlisted, and then we fund around 2/3 of the shortlisted ones. So roughly speaking, this does move around a bit, so it's not gospel. We end up funding about kind of 1 in 10 of the applications that come to us, which is probably a fairly sort of typical hit rate, I think. Important point also to stress is that we do fund projects and we don't have a fellowship system, so all the funding is for projects, and obviously most of the funding for projects is for people, as Julie was explaining, but it's projects we fund and not people, and not fellowships. And just to give you an idea of our kind of scale, any one time we've got about 200 live grants. I think at the moment the total value of those is just below 70 million. So we have a big kind of portfolio of work. What we're looking for, these are essentially the headline assessment criteria when we get an application in. And as I say, all this is on our website if you want to take a look at our guide for applicants. There's also some eligibility criteria. Those are sort of set out on the website with an eligibility checker tool. I wasn't going to go into those today, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you want to kind of come back to those. And I think kind of some of the obvious things about what we're looking for in an application is that you have to be eligible. Your proposal had to speak to the broad priorities that we set out in our guide for applicants on our website, and the things that we are trying to achieve. An application should be accessible, clear and concise, and making the case for its importance. And that's a really key point, and I think that's building on what Jim was saying earlier. Essentially, you've got to convince us that why is this project needed, and why now, and why done in the way you're suggesting it. So is the project relevant? Is it a novel and interesting question, addressing an important issue? Does it align with Nuffield's mission and is relevant to our sort of areas of expertise? So I'll talk a bit more about those in a minute. But for example, we don't really fund research on health, so we sort of discourage people from applying to us about certainly sort of medical or clinical health. We do some things on mental health, but we have certain parameters that we work within. How would what you're proposing add to the existing knowledge base? Is there a clear conceptual framework? What's the sort of underpinning structure which demonstrates your understanding of the social context in which the research would be conducted? We absolutely encourage people to come with a clear kind of conceptual theoretical position. I guess we always would say though that you've got to show that you would be led by the evidence. So one thing we sometimes find is that we sometimes think we get applications that look a bit like people know what they want to say almost before they've done the research, and we would definitely sort of push back on that and say, well, we understand you've got a sort of starting theoretical position, but you've got to be open to adapting that in light of what the evidence shows. I mentioned rigor, methodology. So is the question researchable? Does the methodology look appropriate and rigorous? So methods need to be robust and right for the question. And I should stress that qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods are all fine. So there's not a preference in terms of the type of method. It's just got to be the right one for the question. Good team. I know we've talked a bit about that already this morning. Does the team possess the appropriate experience, expertise, and potential? And of course, that would be a relative assessment. So if it was an early career researcher leading the team, or perhaps as a sole applicant, that's fine. We have now got a new requirement on teams to show how they would develop the potential of their team, including if early career researchers are involved in the team as co-Is or just part of the wider research team. We do ask the PI to demonstrate how you develop the potential of the team. So that's part of our sort of wider interest in helping develop the careers of early career researchers. Value for money, of course. Is the budget you're requesting appropriate? Does it offer good value for money? Will it be used to best effect to achieve the outcomes? And route to impact, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Is there a clear route? We understand that impact is subject to many sort of steps along the way, but is there a clear route to using the outputs from the research to influence future outcomes? And just to expand upon that, because it's such a kind of key part of what we do, and I guess of every funder too, and we're not unusual in that regard, but we really do have a strong focus on kind of to what end is this research being done? And I've on the right of the slide there's just sort of broad types of impacts I've mentioned already, influencing policy or practice, but we're also interested in work that might shape public debate about an issue. And also capacity building within a sector. I mean, that's an important element of what we do. Can the research contribute to the sort of wider research ecosystem and developing knowledge capacity within that system? But I guess we're often particularly interested in, can this research, has it got the potential to influence policy or practice? We understand that in reality, whether it actually does or not might depend on other factors, but what we're looking for in the application stage is that you've got an understanding of what you want to do and a sort of clear plan for how you might do that. So, can you be clear about why you're doing this research, what it might achieve, who might benefit, and how it might be used to have an impact for those target groups? And particularly, I think, what sort of engagement is needed to make that happen? What sort of audiences are you targeting? So I mentioned we've got three sort of broad domains of research interest. So I'm here today from our justice team. Education and welfare are other two. Education is actually our biggest area of research across the foundation. Welfare is also very large, and that's but obviously I'm going to talk mainly about justice. So I'm just going to segue slightly from talking about research applications to giving a little flavour of what are kind of key priorities in justice. Obviously, society needs a fair and effective justice system. That's what we're kind of aiming for and hoping our research can achieve. And we all know, of course, at the moment that the justice system is under considerable pressure. And you'll know better than me. I'm sure about the sort of challenges that's facing, whether it's lengthy case backlogs, declining infrastructure, and a kind of shortage of key people and resources. That there are significant problems facing justice systems across the UK, and we're interested in research. It's looking at that in all three UK jurisdictions, whether separately or comparatively. And I think what we're particularly interested, I guess, is not just the system, the kind of the crisis, the systems, but what that means for the experiences and outcomes of people who are in touch with the justice system. Because we know that any contact with the justice system can have a major and lasting effect on people's lives. And people often feel that the justice system can be inaccessible, complicated, and people don't often feel equal before the law. So what is the impact of that contact on people's wider life chances? And we take a very kind of broad view of justice. We look at before and beyond. It's not just about courts and tribunals, it's about what's happening, perhaps sort of from early legal advice right through to the agencies who are implementing judicial decisions. And our sort of key themes and topics in justice at the moment, so kind of along the bottom there, the key themes are around access to justice, kind of meaningful participation in justice, fair process, fair decisions, issues around disparity, discrimination, decision making, trust and legitimacy, public trust and legitimacy in the justice system, outcomes, particularly sort of efficiency and effective, sort of what outcomes is the system producing, And lastly, sort of broad point about systems. I mean, this is about, does the justice system work as a system or as a series of systems? How does the justice system connect with social policy systems beyond justice, such as education? So that sort of broader systemic view of justice. And then our kind of our priority topic areas at the moment, and these are quite broadly defined, and they're not the only things we fund, but our sort of real priority areas are around family justice. It's a very big area of function for Foundation. We also have the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory you might have heard of, that's sort of related part of the Foundation. Social welfare law, and particularly people's ability to challenge decisions made about them in that sort of arena. So sort of links of our interest in administrative justice. And then thirdly, youth justice, which is our priority area of interest at the moment within criminal justice. So we do find a bit of work in relation to adult criminal justice, but we're particularly interested in youth justice. And a lot of the kind of broader connection, I guess, across the Foundation is an particular interest that the Nuffield Foundation has in the lives of children and families. I won't dwell on this, just to show you here's some outputs from grants we funded recently. There was some work on criminal trial process, lots of work on children's social care, both from a qualitative and quantitative point of view, administrative decision making, private family law and divorce, and what happens to people's property and finances, and an important project in Northern Ireland on access to justice and supporting litigants in person. And so these are just some recent examples of reports that have come out from projects. We're also funding new projects. I mean, I know we've just funded Nina Vaswani at the Scottish Centre, who's doing a participant study of children in conflict with the law. So there's lots of examples on our website. All our live projects are there, so you can look there and get an idea of the sort of work we're funding. Okay, I'll also just briefly mention this is a new programme we've launched this year, Racial Diversity UK, taking applications, deadline also mid-October. So a new programme to understand the pathways and barriers to a racially just and inclusive society. And it's trying to do that in kind of forward-focused way, looking at different elements, social, economic, political and cultural aspects of how the diversity, the demographics in the UK is changing, and what within the context of what shaped that, particularly sort of our colonial history. So that's again, more details on the website. It's a funding area that you may be interested in too. Next year we'll be releasing a new strategy that's still kind of being worked on, but just to give you a flavour of the sort of big questions that we're going to be focusing on right across the Foundation in the future. How can we build a prosperous and fair society where people feel secure, can fulfil their potential? How can we build an inclusive society where people feel they belong and can live well? How do we ensure people in society benefit from rapid developments in science and technology? That's an area that's sort of been an area of focus for the Foundation for its entire 80-year history. Particular focus, I think, in the new strategy on sustainable societies, sustainable places, which is partly about the climate and environmental crises, but more broadly a sort of focus on place. And then lastly, how can we rebuild and maintain effective, accountable and trustworthy institutions? And that's a particular area of interest, I guess, from our work on justice and law. So I mentioned a little bit earlier about early career researchers, and that's an area where we do want to do more, which we're trying to do more at the moment in terms of support we give. Obviously, we're a relatively small funder compared to, say, the Research Council, so there are sort of limits on what we can do. But we are encouraging greater support from grant holders and institutions. And I mentioned earlier that applicants now have to show what they'll do to develop the potential of their team, how they'll support more junior members of the team. And then we're going to ask them to do that, to actually report in their progress reports on what they've done to actually develop team members. And we've established this emerging researcher network, regular newsletters, LinkedIn group, events and training opportunities, and the photos from one of those. At the moment, that's just for early career researchers already working on projects that we're funding, so it's not open more broadly. But even so, that's already covering a considerable number of researchers, and we had a really great event earlier in the year about that. I've mentioned it all, but just to reiterate that early career researchers comply to our main research grants, either themselves as the lead applicant or as part of a wider team. So just to recap, if you are thinking of applying to us, read our eligibility criteria, make sure you read our guide for applicants, make the case well and succinctly for the importance of your project. Why do you want to do this? Why does it matter? Explain your methodology well, identify the key audiences and the target groups for your research, and outline your pathways to impact. And there are various ways to keep in touch with us. You can sign up to our newsletter, lots of information on our website. So I will stop there, if that's okay. I'll just stop sharing. I'm back. There we go.
Perfect.
Happy to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thanks so